On an ordinary Wednesday morning in Providence, Rhode Island, a father named Darrell Crow walked into the municipal courthouse with an unusual companion. His 5-year-old son Jacob clutched his hand as they entered the building, the boy's eyes wide at the marble columns and echoing hallways. Darrell was there to contest a parking ticket, a routine matter that should have taken 15 minutes. Neither father nor son knew they were about to become part of a moment that would be watched millions of times around the world. Behind the bench sat Judge Frank Caprio, a man who had earned a reputation far beyond his Rhode Island courtroom. For decades, Caprio had presided over municipal violations with a blend of legal precision and compassion that defied courtroom stereotypes. His show, Caught in Providence, had transformed what could have been dry traffic court proceedings into human drama. People came to him with parking tickets and moving violations, but they left with something more. Caprio listened to stories, weighed circumstances, and dispensed justice tempered with mercy. This morning would test those principles in an unexpected way. Darrell Crow stood before the bench and explained his situation. He'd been cited for a parking violation, a ticket he believed was unjust given the circumstances. As he spoke, young Jacob stood beside him, occasionally tugging at his father's sleeve, peering up at the imposing figure of the judge. Caprio noticed the boy immediately. In his years on the bench, he'd seen defendants bring lawyers, witnesses, photographs, and documents. But a 5-year-old assistant was something new. The judge's eyes moved from father to son, and a slight smile crossed his face. Judge Caprio leaned forward. Rather than addressing Darrell, he spoke directly to Jacob. Would the boy like to come up and sit with him on the bench? Jacob's eyes went even wider. He looked to his father, who nodded encouragingly. Moments later, the 5-year-old was climbing the steps to the elevated judicial bench, a journey that must have felt like scaling a mountain. Caprio helped him into the chair beside his own. The courtroom, which moments before had been filled with the usual procedural tension, softened. Everyone watched the small boy settle into the seat of judgment. With Jacob now beside him, Caprio returned to the matter at hand. Darrell's parking ticket carried a fine, as all such violations did. But the judge had a teaching moment in mind. He explained to Jacob that his father had received a ticket for a parking violation. The violation meant a penalty had to be considered. This wasn't just about Darrell anymore. Caprio was inviting a child into the process of justice itself, making him a participant rather than an observer. The boy listened with the serious concentration only young children can muster when they know something important is happening. Then came the question that would change everything. Judge Caprio presented Jacob with 3 options for his father's fine. The first option was $10. The second was $20. The third was $30. 3 simple numbers, ascending in value. To an adult familiar with courtroom negotiations, the strategy might have been transparent. Choose the lowest number. Minimize the penalty. But Caprio wasn't asking an adult. He was asking a 5-year-old boy who was being given real responsibility for the first time in a real courtroom with real consequences. Jacob's face grew thoughtful. Jacob considered the options carefully. You could see his young mind working through the problem. Then, with the confidence of someone who has arrived at the correct answer, he gave his response. $30. The highest amount. Not the lowest. Not the middle. The maximum penalty. The courtroom fell silent for a moment. Darrell's expression was a mix of surprise and parental pride at his son's earnestness. Judge Caprio's eyebrows rose. This was not the answer anyone expected. But rather than move on quickly, the judge did what good judges do. He asked why. Jacob's reasoning was beautifully simple. 30 was the biggest number, he explained. And in his 5-year-old understanding of the world, bigger was better. He wasn't thinking about minimizing punishment or saving money. He was thinking about giving his father the best option, and in his experience, the biggest number was always the best choice. It was the logic of a child who measures value by magnitude, who hasn't yet learned that in the world of fines and penalties, less is more. The innocence of it was profound. Here was pure honesty, untouched by strategy or self-interest. Judge Caprio sat back in his chair. In that moment, he faced a choice of his own. He could accept Jacob's answer at face value, impose the $30 fine, and move to the next case. The law would be satisfied. The violation would be paid. But something more important was happening in his courtroom. A father had brought his son to witness justice. A child had participated in good faith, making what he believed to be the right choice. And a judge had the power to show both of them what mercy looked like. Caprio's face softened into a smile. The judge leaned toward Jacob and made a proposal. What if, instead of any fine at all, we did something different? What if your father took you out to breakfast? A real breakfast, just the two of them. If Daryl would promise to do that, if he would spend that morning with his son over pancakes or eggs or whatever Jacob wanted, then Judge Caprio would dismiss the ticket entirely. No $10. No $20. No $30. Zero. The fine would disappear, replaced by something more valuable: time together. Jacob's face lit up with a smile that could have powered the entire courthouse. What Caprio had done was transform a transactional moment into a relational one. Parking tickets exist to enforce rules and generate revenue. They're administrative, impersonal, bureaucratic. But in this courtroom, on this morning, a parking ticket had become an opportunity. An opportunity for a father to show his son that the world could be kind. An opportunity for a child to learn that authority figures could be compassionate. And an opportunity for everyone watching to remember that justice isn't just about punishment. It's about understanding, context, and sometimes, redemption through connection. The video of Judge Caprio and Jacob spread across the internet like morning light. Millions of people watched the exchange, shared it, commented on it. In a digital landscape often dominated by conflict and outrage, here was something different. Kindness. Wisdom. A judge who understood that his role wasn't just to apply rules but to serve people. A father who brought his son to court and got a lesson in grace. And a 5-year-old boy whose innocent answer had revealed a deeper truth: sometimes the best outcome isn't the one you calculate, but the one you create together. Frank Caprio's approach to justice didn't begin with Jacob. It had been his methodology for decades. He believed that most people who appeared before him weren't criminals. They were citizens who made mistakes, faced difficult circumstances, or simply had bad luck. A parking ticket might represent a genuine oversight or a moment of desperation. Behind every violation was a human being with a story. Caprio made it his practice to hear those stories, to weigh not just the letter of the law but its spirit, and to remember that the goal of municipal court wasn't to crush people but to maintain order while preserving dignity. In an era of mandatory minimums and zero-tolerance policies, Judge Caprio represented something increasingly rare: judicial discretion guided by empathy. His viral moments weren't accidents. They were the natural result of a consistent philosophy applied day after day, case after case. When Jacob chose the $30 fine, he unknowingly set up a perfect demonstration of that philosophy. The judge could have accepted the answer and collected the money. Instead, he saw a chance to invest in something that wouldn't appear on any court revenue report: a child's understanding of fairness, a father's gratitude, and a community's faith in justice. We don't know exactly where Daryl and Jacob went for breakfast that morning. The cameras didn't follow them to whatever diner or restaurant they chose. But we can imagine it. A father and son sitting across from each other in a booth, Jacob recounting his time on the judge's bench, Daryl explaining what had happened and why it mattered. Perhaps they talked about fairness, about second chances, about how sometimes the world surprises you with kindness when you expect punishment. Or perhaps they just enjoyed pancakes and talked about 5-year-old things. Either way, that breakfast was worth more than $30. It was worth more than any fine. Stories like Jacob and Judge Caprio's don't just entertain. They teach. Every person who watched that video saw a model for how authority could be exercised. Not with harshness or indifference, but with creativity and care. Parents saw an example of including children in adult moments without burdening them. Judges and officials saw a reminder that rules exist to serve people, not the other way around. And children, if they watched, saw that grown-ups in positions of power could be kind, that courtrooms didn't have to be scary, and that sometimes asking questions and being honest leads to the best outcomes of all. The question Judge Caprio asked Jacob was simple: which fine should your father pay? But embedded in that question was trust. Trust that a child could participate in justice. Trust that the process could accommodate innocence. Trust that the right answer might not be the expected one. When Jacob chose $30, he answered honestly. When Caprio responded with breakfast, he answered truthfully too, that connection matters more than collection, that mercy is a form of justice, and that sometimes the purpose of a courtroom is to send people out better than they came in. One question. One honest answer. Everything changed, not because the law was broken, but because it was fulfilled in a way that honored both its letter and its heart. That's the story of Judge Caprio and the 5-year-old boy who reminded a watching world what justice, at its best, can look like.